Okay, we are live. It's Wednesday. My name's April Sabral, and I'm the host of this show called The Positive Effect. And, it's all about celebrating our industry, retail, and positive leadership within the industry, because I think it can't be it can't be over celebrated, actually, because I think it's such a powerful thing. And I'm so excited today, Andy, to have you on the show. So welcome.
Thank you very much, April. I'm thrilled to be here.
I met you a year ago, a bit over a year ago in New York at a retail event, and lots has happened to you since then. So I'm so excited to learn more about your career, your journey, your leadership, and talk about your book that you have published since I last met you. So with that, tell us, our audience is a retail audience. And so I always think it's really fascinating for people to learn a bit more about our careers, how it started. Ron wrote that book, Retail Pride, that's all about the accidental retail career. So walk us through, how did you get started in retail? Was it accidental? Did you fall into it? And then just give us a quick overview of your career, because I think it's fascinating. And then we'll dive into more of, more stuff around leadership in your book.
Yes, sounds good. So way back in the 1980s, I was a computer nerd. And I used to say I was a nerd before it was cool. Now it's all things are about tech. But back then, my grandmother yelled at me. She's like, you need to, quit playing with those computers and go play sports. But I did that and ended up getting a degree in computer science. And I got my first job. I was offered two jobs out of college. One was at a bank and one was at the Limited, the Limited
Yep.
in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah.
And the bank was paying me $1,000 more than the Limited. So I was like, well, I'll just take that job. But I had a chat over breakfast with my father and said, you can't think about $1,000. You have to think about longer term. Mm. And I argued, that no, $1,000 is a lot of money, but he felt like, a bank is going to be slow and monotonous and boring. And I still think that. So I took the job at the Limited. So that's how I accidentally fell into retail. But I was a computer programmer that happened to work at a retailer. And I was doing replenishment systems, supply chain way back in the day. Well, 2 years into that job, they decided to start a little startup company, a spinoff, and they needed somebody to run the technology. So I was like, me. A lot of people weren't interested because this was going to be a lot of hours and a big job.
Yeah.
Well, everybody's heard of that company. It's Bath and Body Works.
Oh, wow.
I ended up being the first IT person at Bath and Body Works, in charge of taking all the systems at Express, which was one of the divisions, spinning them up and getting us live. And that was the turning point for me, where because we were small, there was like 15 of us. Yeah. I get to work with the CEO and the merchants and the CFO. So I flipped from being a tech that worked in retailer to a retailer that knew tech.
Oh, wow.
That moment, that year of my life. And, we launched and it's gone on to be a great retail brand. I only spent a year there. Then I went to Express. Another big moment for me was when I left the Limited, I went to Joann Stores. And this was in 1998. And we implemented SAP for retail. And that was interesting. It was one of the first ever SAPs in the United States. Wow. For SAP retail. I got quoted and I angered the CEO of SAP, and he called to yell at me. And I was so excited because I was like 29 years old, this billionaire from Germany yelling at me. And I had everyone in my office on speakerphone, and we got through that. That gave me a little notoriety, and then I ended up becoming the CIO at Pier 1 Imports. And I stayed there for 16 years. So,
wow.
Long tenure I think average CIO tenure is about 3.5 years. And, we went from basically paper processes to automation, built Pier1.com from 0 to 500 million. I was part of the team that did that. And 2016, I'm like, I got to do something different. So I left retail. I moved to Nashville, and I went to work in senior living. And boy, I thought retail was backwards. We were talking about fax machines, but it was fun. It was a big company and a lot of really amazing people. But then just 2 years after that, Sharon Leidy, the CEO of Vitamin Shoppe, who I worked with at Pier 1, gave me a call. Said, we got plans to do something amazing at Vitamin Shoppe. I'd love you to come on board. So I put my stuff in the back of my car, my fiance and I, and we moved to New York City. So that's my whole career.
I love it.
So if you just look back, it's like 32 years in retail minus the 2, and 30 of it in leadership, and 20 of it as a senior executive. So what's really amazing is, even though I was only a hands down individual contributor for 2 years, those 2 years, and that's a long time ago,
Right.
it influences everything I do still to this day.
Really?
Try to
You can
remember.
actually remember those 2 years of
Yeah.
influencing the rest of your career. To unpack that a little bit. How? Why?
Well, first of all, you're brand new, and so it's a whole different world, and just watching how people are treated from their manager, from their peers, being onboarded, how I communicated. There was a moment I was working at Express, and my job was to write a report for the CEO. And the way it worked is she told our CIO, who told a director, who told a manager, who told me, and I'm not making that up. Well, then I did it and gave it to my manager, gave it to the director, and this went around and around. It kept coming back with red pens on it. So I was bold, and I called up the admin of the CEO and said, if I could just have 10 minutes with her, we could get to the bottom of what she's looking for. She's like, come right now. So I go to the exec floor. Yeah. Wow, it's nice up here. There's windows, and I'm in my normal nerd outfit with my khakis and my blue shirt. Still wearing that now. And
I love it.
I come in this fancy office. I show her the report. She's like, no, I need this, this, and this. I go back to my desk. I stayed there all night, got it done in the morning. And I got in so much trouble for that. You do not go around the boss and management, but I go, look, I solved the problem. We would have been another weeks or months.
Right.
So that's a lesson as an individual contributor. I wish I could have just said to my management, hey, let me go talk to her.
Right.
What's the problem? We're all adults. Like, I'm not going to harm her or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I know things hopefully are a lot more open and flat now, but that's something that always sticks with me.
Oh yeah, I totally remember those days of those, like when I was at Gap back in the day, and those layers. And then when I became a vice president, I was like, I tried to cut through those layers because I knew people were just telling me what they thought I wanted to hear versus what I needed to hear, because they were more concerned about how they looked or how their teams looked, right? So, I mean, you write a lot about how to create, foster innovation and create culture and amazing teams in your book. And we're going to get to that. But like, what's one of the best pieces of leadership advice you were ever given by somebody in your career that really sticks with you, that you could share with everybody that could maybe help them?
Yeah. So for me, it's about leadership is about where you're going, not how to get there. And so I'm all about, let's describe the destination with some excitement. And I always use Wizard of Oz, right? Like, Oz is going to be this great place, and we're going to have a bath and a good meal, and we're going to get the Tin Man shined up. And the road to Oz is treacherous, but if a manager's like, go down that yellow brick road and turn left here and turn right here, that's not inspirational. But if you talk about, hey, you got flying monkeys and all these things going on, but boy, it's going to be worth it because Oz is the destination. So for me, leadership is about understanding where you're going and describing it with so much passion that the team's going to be willing to fight through whatever it takes to get there, and let them figure out the best path.
I mean, you talked a little bit about like being bold. Like, there's a few things that came up in your like overview of your career of like, I had to fight with this person, I had to be bold and go around it. How do we encourage, or how do you encourage leaders coming up, in the ranks, or individual contributors even, to have that boldness and have that courage to be able to speak out? Because that's a confident thing and a big deal, and it's a risk for many people, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think about a stores organization, and in our company, there's something about, say, 3,500 health enthusiasts that work in the Vitamin Shoppe stores, and a good chunk of them want to be Neil Pans, or the EVP of stores, and that's a steep pyramid to climb, right? So you're not going to get there without standing out, and so for me, it's about volunteering, raising your hand. I consider doing the job perfectly C. You get a C, right? If we're grading you A through F, so if you nail your job, then you meet expectations. Look, if I go for a ride in an Uber, I give them 3 stars if I got there. I'm really mad, but that's not you got to go above and beyond to get that 4-star, and you got to like be extraordinary to get that 5-star. So
yeah.
Raise your hand, be bold, take some risks. I mean, it all has to be with integrity, right? That has to be no, you can't do anything wrong or against the rules. You should read the handbook and understand exactly what you have to do. But within those boundaries, yeah, you gotta go for it.
Yeah, that was me. I was always, like you said, packing up and like moving. Like I was I'll pack up, I'll move, I'll sign up for that project. I'll say yes. I did a lot of that early on in my career when they were doing pilots and things like that. And it sounds like that for you when you were at pivotal points in companies when they were building things, you were part of that. That teaches you a lot, right? Just as a business person, it teaches you a lot, not just being a leader, but just being entrepreneurial.
Yeah, no, the other thing it does, which is so important, is when you get put on these committees, projects, you'll build relationships because usually they'll take, the best and brightest or the people that raise their hand. And so, well, I've built relationships on these committees that, they serve you well for multiple years and you get perspective from other departments. So yeah, there's a lot of benefits. You're getting something done, you're making a splash, but you're also getting to interact and build long-term relationships across your organization.
Mm-hmm. How do you foster innovation because that's the title of your book, we'll jump into that. So how do you foster innovation in IT team within a retail organization?
Well, first and foremost, you got to do the day job. So, when I walk in a room and turn the switch, I expect the light to come on. And I pick up the phone. I guess in the old days, you got a dial tone. And when I get on the computer, my email better be there. And so a lot of IT people, I think, get bored with that. But you've got to do the day job, what we call KTLO, keep the lights on. It's the most important thing. And so you got to build an environment where, look, if I'm trying to be in a meeting with the executives, drinking some coffee and talking about 5 years from now, but meanwhile, the warehouse is crashing or the boxes aren't getting shipped, you're going to get kicked out of the room. And so a lot of people talk about a seat at the table. You got to earn your way in by making sure your stuff is covered. The next thing then is what I call psychological safety. And, there's a joke I tell all the time. I'm all for risk as long as nothing goes wrong. We talk about entrepreneurs and they embrace, fail fast, learn. I'm a big fan of SpaceX. They're blowing up rockets and millions of dollars. Like, oh, well, we learned this valve needs to be adjusted, right? So you need to be willing. And if you're not having some failures, you're not pushing the boundaries. So making it okay. And if something goes awry, there's value that comes out of it if you learn something. We've all paid a lot of money in our lives for education. We could consider what we're doing now, continuing our education. We read books, went to college. So a failed project is, it's expensive education, but boy, is it an education. And if you take the time to learn from these things, then you're a winner. And so I think that's really important that you have to create an environment where it's okay to take risks. And what's the other joke? Fail fast, but not always.
Fail fast, but not always. Oh yeah. Because you gotta have that credibility, like you said, and be able to do the day job, right? Like that matters. It's like you can't just show up and talk about things. You actually have to execute. Retail is a highly executing business. Well, I'm in operations, so like operations is like you got to get the job done. You got to make sure things are rolling, the processes are happening, the customers are happy. And then you can take on more. I always had people like, I want to get promoted. I'm like, well, yeah, but what's going on in your store? What's going on in your district? What's going on in your region before you sign up for things? Because you need to be that expert. So, but you absolutely, I agree. You do have to make mistakes. And sometimes that's hard for leaders to like create that space for their team to make mistakes. For whatever reason, I used to say, don't lead with your title, lead with being who you are first and try and get rid of that title so that you kind of like dissipate that anxiety from people around you when you are in a senior role, because that can happen just when you walk in the room.
Yeah, if people's behavior changes when you walk in the room, that means you're not walking in the room enough.
That's it.
Right?
Oh, I love that. Say that again. If people's behavior change when you don't change when you're walking in the room, you're not walking in the room enough. People need to hear that.
Yeah, right. So when you come around, if all of a sudden everyone's wearing their nice clothes and they sit up straight, I won't say where, but I worked at a place where they had a little HR flag. When HR was on the floor, they'd run the flag up. And so it was like,
oh my God. I mean,
all the time, then, you're just part of the normal.
Listen, being in stores, I used to get the calls. Everybody's coming from San Francisco tomorrow. And everybody would be like, stay up overnight. And I'd be like, I'm not doing that. Like people need to see my store for what it is. It's like, I'm not saying it's not going to look great and wonderful, but it needs to be real. It needs to share those challenges that you're having. I remember many DMs kicking me under the table when I was a store manager being like, can't say that. But
in senior living, we had these communities, and this is where, your parents or grandparents go, and it's a beautiful place. But we had a saying that we always need to be ready for company.
Mm.
And I think that's a good phrase in retail, right? You want to feel good that if the CEO walked in the door, and by the way, Sharon's always walking in our stores, she's in stores nonstop. And so even did it on TV. Well, yeah, ready for company all the time,
Ready for company. That's a really great phrase. That should be in retail training everywhere. I'm gonna write that one down, Andrew. I'm stealing that from you.
All yours.
So when you think about the book, let's jump into the book, because why did you write the book?
Yeah, look, I wrote my book, in my mind, was to 30-year-old me. I've had a nice career, but boy, I made so many mistakes and would love some do-overs. And, I was at a conference sitting in the audience thinking, I have something to share, and so I just started making notes. This was way back in 2018, and I had a little file, and I'd make a note or think of a story. Then COVID happened, and we're all locked up. So I'm like, oh, no time like the present. So I don't consider myself a writer at all. And so I was like, oh, I don't know if I can write. So I actually wrote an article first, stuck that on LinkedIn, and it got, a lot of good, positive feedback. So
I remember that. Yeah.
But yeah, I wrote my book to try to help somebody coming up in their career. And I've already had a few people that, have said it has. So it's just getting the ideas out.
So there's this thing that you shared with, that's a terrible word. There's like a structure of obviously your book and how you talk about leadership and fostering innovation. And there is this thing called, I'm going to say it wrong, Diode. Is that right?
That is not right.
I was practicing before we got on. Okay, say it for me.
All right. So my first year in college, or as you would say, university, I actually was in electrical engineering. So before I flipped to computer science, and it's kind of a long story, but I spent a year, and then I raised my hand and said, hey, what do electrical engineers do? And they're like, oh, you sit in a lab. I'm like, oh, no, I'm a people person. I need a different career. So I learned a little bit about technology and computers and how they work. And one of the components in computers is called a diode. And we've all heard of LED light emitting diode. So a diode is a electronic component that allows electricity to flow freely in one direction. So you put a current on it, it goes right through it, no resistance. However, if you reverse the current, send it the other way, it blocks it. And so this is really important to make computers work, because that's how you do ones and zeros, and then you can do all that. The reason I think there's a really neat leadership principle around that is I apply it to, if you're a leader and you get praise, like, hey, that was a great job, your role should be to let all that flow freely right through you, no resistance, like the diode, right to your team. And you hear the great leaders say it's team effort. My team did it, not me. In fact, once I was asked to be on a cover of a magazine, IT magazine, and I put the whole department, we did a 150-person picture. So yeah, letting it go. And the other direction is when there's, things didn't go well, there's anger, there's complaints. It's your job to stop it, protect the team, right? So that failed. So now you're dialed in the other direction and say, I'm the leader. This is my responsibility. I take full responsibility for it.
That's brilliant. I love that. I've never heard
that. The complaints stop at you.
I've never heard that term, in any leadership book I've ever read. So thank you for clarifying that, because I was looking at that this morning. I was like, that's so interesting. What does that mean? And it does. It makes complete sense. You also shared with me basically 10 things or 10 steps or principles that you believe, I'm assuming, and you write about in the book about what leadership means to you.
And I'll go back though, because I did actually get some pushback in a really fun LinkedIn chat about my be a diode, where someone said, maybe you're whitewashing things and teams need to know when things don't go well. And, hopefully that person's listening, but that is not what I'm saying at all, right? It's not like, hey team, everything's wonderful, so it is nuanced. You just have to make sure that I'm not saying that you protect them, coddle them like they're infants. I mean, we're all adults and stuff, but
I mean, yeah, I agree.
I'm not blaming them, right? Like, hey, the warehouse went down. Oh, that's because of Bob. He didn't do this or that. Like, hey, I run that team. I'm responsible. Now you go talk to Bob and go, hey, man.
Well, that's the skill, but that's the piece I'm getting to, because I always have to demystify what positive leadership means. Because some people will say, well, you just can't be positive all the time, April. That's not realistic. And I'm like, I'm not saying just being positive and not addressing issues and concerns. I'm saying have a positive effect on people when you do it. because there is a right way and a wrong way to lead and give constructive feedback, right? And there is also a right way of developing teams. Because for me, it's about when you leave somebody, I always say the positive engagement formula is when you can inspire positive emotions in somebody and then develop that skill that they need to do that job, that's when the magic happens. That's when you're having a positive effect. And when somebody's not doing their job, you got to give them the feedback, deal with it, coach them in the right way. But they should never leave. Like I've had people leave my team and then thank me 2-3 years later. It was the best thing that they did, or they've self-selected that this wasn't for them because it was dealt with in the right way. So I understand what you're saying, because it's like there's not just one part of leadership, but it's a complexity of it. But I do like what you put in these 10 steps around perform career development planning, because I think that's one of the most missed steps in a lot of coaching, development, team training. They kind of miss that team development career planning step because they just feel like that it's just too busy and they just don't get to it. And they just think dropping feedback every day is what that career development planning. So how do you unpack that or explain what that means? Like, or have you got any examples, I don't know, around what you do to do career planning?
My first tip, it almost feels like sarcasm. It's like ask people what they want from their career, but I think it gets missed. And I think a lot of times, and I've been guilty of this, you think everyone wants what you want, right? So I meet everybody and go, oh, you want to be a COO, but that's not true. And so some people want more money, some want more responsibility, some want to change the world, some want to just have an impact. Some love being individual. So asking people what they want is the first step. You can't do career development planning until you know where they're going. And if you create the illusion or you create the misunderstanding that everyone has to be on the path to CEO, you're not doing them. So I always start with ask people what they want, have a discussion about it. And they're not you, their career path will be different. What I did in the 80s is completely irrelevant to 2022, so it doesn't matter. So asking people, and then career development planning is not about the company. It's about the person. And you have to accept that for many of these people, they're going to hit their career goals, not at your company. And that's okay, because we want to get the most out of the person and have them get the most out of the company while they're with us.
Right.
Whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, but let's maximize it and get their full discretion. And as a leader, knowing that you're helping them get there, right? If someone wants to be in job, who knows, VP of X, then there's only one of those in your, help them get there, and that's going to pay off for you. So career development planning is not performance review. It's not about looking back. It's about looking forward. There's a great model, the 80-20-10 model that, that doesn't have 70-20-10, that says most of people's knowledge comes from actual experience. Mm-hmm. So imagine I'm talking to somebody and they go, I really want to be an accountant. I think that's nuts, but maybe they want to be an accountant. And so I could send them off to a class, or I could, but imagine if I let them spend 4 hours a week or 8 hours a week shadowing someone in accounting, or maybe doing the budget for one of my departments. So now they're getting that experience, and they're getting to know somebody, they're building a relationship, they're showing they can do it. That's going to help you be an accountant way better than courses. And had I not asked that question, I could have made 100 guesses and not guessed the person wanted to be an accountant, right? Mm. So you ask them, you understand, and then you create opportunities for experience to emerge. And what we opened with is that idea about projects or doing more. If you're the leader and someone's interested in whatever it is, I want to be a regional manager, I want to be in visual merchandising, I want to be in computer programming, then something comes up, boom, you have their name will pop in your head, and you select them for that.
Yeah, and it's for me, it's such a priority when I go into organizations to ask people, like, what is your career development planning, and do you know what your people want to do? Because when I've read exit interviews over the years, it's usually people leave, number one, because of the leader they work for, or number two, because there was no career planning. And then that leader will be like, no, we were having conversations about it. I'm like, but there wasn't a plan down on paper. So I'm a big one on writing that plan down, so that person can own it and then bring it to you like quarterly basis or whatever to tell you what they're doing with it. And there's been so many times in organizations I've worked with people that are just like, I've never had a plan on paper, but they've been in a career for 20 years. And it just solidifies it. It makes them feel good about having something that they can do and that they can own. So 100%. And I think asking better questions and not making assumptions is a skill that we all need to be better at as leaders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's funny what you said. I used to work with a CFO, and she taught me, if you don't write it down, you didn't do it. You ever ask someone, do you have a strategy? Like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. Like, let me see the document. If you don't have a document, you don't have a strategy. And it could be a napkin. I'm not asking them for a fancy PowerPoint, but if it's not written down, you didn't do it, you don't have it. You just thought about it.
God, you're dropping some gems of wisdom on us today. I tell you, I can see like lots of comments in the underneath the feed, so you'll have to go back and have a look at it, because these one-liners are the things that like people can take away and be like, I can remember that, I can use that. The other thing that you put in here was, which I thought was really interesting, that you added this word, because I'm a big one on words. It says have a real open door policy, not just have an open door policy. Have a real. Why did you add real in there?
Well, I was in a room full of people and I said, raise your hand if you have a closed door policy. 100% of leaders have open door policies if you ask them, of course. But now they're in meetings from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. The thing is read on their Teams or Zoom, busy in a meeting, out of office. And so a real open door policy is not only having it as a policy, but actually creating the time, and people are aware that they can talk to you whenever they want. So I like when college professors will have office hours, like I'm in the office these hours, you knew you could go talk to them. So you could create office hours. I let people know, like I'm lucky enough to have an executive assistant. I said, anyone who works for me wants to talk to me, we're going to make it work. It might mean canceling a vendor. It could be on my commute. It could be, during my Peloton bike ride at 6 a.m., or it could be in the evening, but we're going to make time for them, and just making sure people know that and they're not intimidated. So if you say you have an open door policy, it's meaningless, especially at a higher level, unless you put in energy and effort that people can actually take you up on it. So real means there's availability and people know how to find it.
I like that, because a lot of people will say to me, oh, you're really busy. And I'll be like, I'm busy, but I'm available. Right. And that's what you're talking about. You're talking about making yourself available at times and letting them know that, so that they can come and talk to you. That's a great explanation, Andrew. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, look, we're all busy. There's nothing more democratic than time. We all have 24 hours, right? So it's not about being busy. It's about how we choose to use it. So.
Yeah. So we're going to start wrapping up soon. I mean, it always goes really fast, this show, but why do you love retail? What do you love about retail? Because there's so many things I love about it, but what do you love about it?
One thing I love is that we're dealing with the actual customers, whether it's direct. And so we're getting to see, you get instant feedback. You can sit in the store and see if you're doing well or not. You can watch the web data and see if you're doing well or not. So I like that. I like the pace of change.
Yeah.
We all wake up and don't know what today's going to bring. And, it's always been true. And then it's become even more true, the last couple of years. But the pace of change and retail has been always a hotbed for innovation, right? Talk about fostering innovation. But I mean, I grew up when there was just stores in a mall, there wasn't mobile and there wasn't the internet. All this stuff has happened in one lifetime, and it's really, really fun. And there's a Justin Trudeau quote that the pace of change has never been faster, and it'll never be this slow again.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah. And we won't worry about who it's from, but as fast as things are moving, they're going to continue to move even faster. And
right.
So I love that excitement, the energy that, the change brings, and staying with it.
So what would you say then in the next, decade of retail leadership in your area of the business is going to, what are you looking forward to, or what do you think is going to help them be successful? Like, because there's, we're developing now the next succession plan of leaders, right, to take over, not today, but like in the future, those senior roles. So what advice would you give them?
The silos are going away quickly, right? And so, there's merchants, there's store ops, there's the web, there's the supply chain. Those are all blurring. There's a lot of debate. I met the woman, Leslie Hand, who invented the term omnichannel. Then there's Jeff Roster going, oh, that term's dead. And now everyone's going to call it integrated or seamless or frictionless. But I think we're going to get rid of the adjective of channel, and it's going to be, we're selling to our customer. I mean, at the Vitamin Shop, you buy online, pick up in store. We ship from store. We ship to the store for the customer. We're selling in other retailers. We're on marketplaces. We're drop ship. I mean, there's not like you should see our report, right? It's 100 columns long. So I think that you're not going to, if you come up now, I wouldn't have a discipline. Your discipline needs to be all disciplines and really understand. Supply chain is digital, marketing is digital, right? There's tech in these things. One of my good buddies is a supply chain expert, and he said, all I have left is technology. He's like, everything we've done about making the person work faster or putting in the right racks and conveyors, but now it's about tech. So learning all that and thinking of it as not a channel anymore is the key.
I love that. That's really great advice. And like being kind of like learning a bit of everything. I know I've had a few people on the show that said when they got to take over other areas of the business that they weren't the expert in, and they let go of being that expert in and really focused on their leadership, they grew into CEO roles because of that. And that can be a little bit nerve-wracking sometimes, but I think that's great. And I think also what you're sharing is, what I'm hearing is the customer journey. It's really about the customer journey through every touch point and not siloing them, and making sure that that customer journey is what everybody in the business cares about, because that's what matters, right?
Yeah, it's not a funnel anymore, right? They're coming from every direction. It's a bombardment. Yeah.
It is. It totally is. Well, Andrew, it has been a pleasure having you on The Positive Effect. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and being available for us and sharing with us all about your leadership and your book. And, you know, I hope people that see this show share it on their feeds. I say this every week, guys, share it, tag somebody. And the link for Andrew's book is just underneath the video, so you can go and grab it because it's got some amazing words of wisdom in there. And yeah, I'm excited to see what's going to happen with you and this book. And, you know, I just wish you the best at the Vitamin Shop and everything that you're doing. You've done some amazing, innovative things over the last couple of years. And thanks for being on. And thanks for being such an advocate for leadership in retail.
Very welcome. A lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. All right. So we'll say bye for now, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.